The gear shimmered in the lantern light, a small thing that pulsed faintly as if it had a heartbeat. It was warm to the touch when Elias picked it up, though no fire burned nearby. He turned it over in his palm. The metal felt impossibly smooth, the engraving impossibly deep. His name was etched perfectly, in letters that hadn't existed the day before. Behind him, the woman stood still, her silver eyes fixed not on the gear, but on the space Elias had just stepped out of, the doorway of the clock which remained impossibly open. The shop beyond it was now faint, blurred as if seen through water. Shadows from the clocks outside the portal bent inward, stretching unnaturally. "What is this place?" Elias asked, his voice hollow. She didn't answer right away. She stepped past him and placed a hand on the nearest wall. It wasn't stone, not wood, not metal. It shimmered under her fingers, then turned solid, revealing a scene like a window into memory. A version of Elias 10 years younger stood over his wife's hospital bed. "I remember this," Elias whispered. "That was the day, the last day." "These are not memories," she said softly. "They are echoes. You called to them, and now they answer." More mirrors awakened as they moved down the corridor, each one lit from within. In one, Elias as a boy was laughing beside a creek. In another, he was shouting, angry, afraid, at someone he couldn't quite recognize. They passed dozens, maybe hundreds, each reflecting something just slightly off. A dream remembered, a nightmare half forgotten. Some showed rooms Elias had never stepped foot in. Others showed versions of himself that had taken different paths. A version that left Velmir, a version who never touched the clock, a version who died young. And then, suddenly, a mirror showed the woman. But not her as she was now. Her eyes were not silver, and she was smiling, gently, truly. She was surrounded by books and gears, standing in a room filled with ticking things, a place not unlike Elias's own shop. "You were a clockmaker," he said. "I was many things," she replied. "What happened to you?" She turned to him, and for a moment her smile was almost human again. "I wound it," she said. "Long ago. I gave it my name, and for a time I held the doors shut." Elias felt a pressure behind his chest, like breath that wouldn't leave. "But now it's my turn?" She nodded. "You've already turned the key. Now you choose." The hall ended in a vast chamber, circular and impossibly tall. At the center stood a tower of gears, rotating slowly on invisible axes. 13 of them, suspended like planets in orbit, each one etched with a name. Some Elias recognized: Mira Thorne, Joseph Cowell, Benji Caslow, his father, his grandfather, all clockmakers. At the top hovered one space where a gear was missing. Elias stepped forward and raised the piece in his palm. The gear lifted from his hand, drawn upward by a force that felt like memory and gravity combined. It clicked into place. The whole tower shifted, groaned, and began to spin with new rhythm. The woman closed her eyes. "For a time," she said, "this will hold it." Elias felt the weight settle over his shoulders. He wasn't tired, not exactly, but still. Something inside him slowed. His heartbeat matched the rhythm of the tower. "What happens now?" he asked. "You rest," she said, "and others forget." The walls around them shimmered and dimmed. The mirrors faded. Elias looked down at his hands, but they were already beginning to turn, not to dust, not to shadow, but to time itself. Threads of golden strands lifting from his skin pulled gently toward the tower. "Will they remember me?" "For a while," she said, "and then only in moments." He smiled softly, closed his eyes. "When she asked for a room," he murmured, "I should have known what she really needed." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave her shelter, and now you've given her silence." The last of Elias Caslow faded into the spinning mechanism. The chamber slowed. The tower dimmed. Outside in the village of Velmir, the snow melted. The sky brightened, and inside the shop, the black clock stood still once more. The doorway was gone. The key too. All that remained on the workbench was a small silver plaque, nailed gently into the wood, in memory of the quiet ones who listen when time knocks. The clocks ticked on, and somewhere, far beneath the surface of the shop, the sleeper rested, not dead, just waiting. The village of Velmir sat folded between the shoulders of two cold mountains, where mist crawled like breath through the forest and the sky rarely smiled. Only a single road coiled in and out of the place, thin, cracked, and mostly forgotten. Those who didn't know about Velmir often never found it, and those who did rarely left. Nestled at the far end of the village square, was a small, crooked building with brass gears nailed to its shutters and a hanging wooden sign that read simply, E. Caslow, Clockmaker. The smell of sawdust and old varnish lingered around the place like an afterthought. Elias Caslow had lived there all his life. He was a quiet man, nearing 70, with soft hands that seemed too gentle to twist metal, but somehow still did. His beard was long, always stained with wood shavings, and his eyes were the colour of old oak. Each morning, before customers came in, not that many ever did, Elias wound each clock in his shop by hand. They lined the walls like time itself had chosen this place to rest. Cuckoo clocks, tower models, desk pieces, carriage clocks with enamel-painted faces and hands as delicate as spider legs. Tick, tick, tick. They all ticked in harmony, except one. In the farthest, darkest corner stood a grandfather clock unlike the rest. Nearly 7 feet tall, made of an unfamiliar black wood with no visible grain, it was carved with symbols no one could name. Strange vines of tarnished brass twisted around its base and up the frame, each leaf serrated like teeth. It bore no maker's mark. Only a thin brass plate near the bottom etched with a single word, Somnum. The sleeper. Elias never let it tick. He never wound it, never opened its face. Yet each day, without fail, he polished it, ran his fingers along the spiralling vines, and whispered beneath his breath. Some of the younger villagers said the clock was cursed. Others said it was a relic of the war, or perhaps older than the village itself. But nobody really knew, and Elias never spoke of it. He just said, some clocks should stay asleep. He lived alone, as he had for decades. His only company were the ticking walls and the whisper of wind outside. Until the knock. It came late, long after the sun had bled behind the trees and the night fog pressed thick against the window panes. It was a sharp, single knock, not hurried, not frantic, just decisive. Elias froze. No one visited this late. He lit a lantern and moved to the door, fingers brushing the key in his vest pocket. He hesitated, then unlatched it. On the doorstep stood a woman, tall, pale, dressed in an old travelling cloak mottled with damp pine needles. Her hair was dark and heavy, curling slightly from the rain. Her eyes, though, they were a cold, steely silver that gleamed in the lantern light. She spoke softly. Room for one night, please. Elias stood in the doorway, lantern casting warm amber shadows across the wet cobblestones. He blinked up at the woman, heart quietly ticking in his chest like one of his clocks. We don't get visitors here, he said, voice hoarse with disuse. Not often. I won't stay long, the woman said. Just a bed. I've travelled far. She spoke without an accent, but something about her tone felt foreign, as if she were trying to remember how to sound human. Elias's eyes swept the road behind her. No horse, no pack, no sound of wheels. She had come on foot, it seemed, through miles of fog and forest. And yet her boots were clean, untouched by mud. After a long pause, Elias stepped aside. I have a spare room. Upstairs. You'll hear clocks, all night long. Hope you can sleep through them. She nodded, stepped inside. The door closed behind her without a breeze. The staircase creaked as Elias led her up. His lantern bounced golden light along the faded wallpaper and dust-lined rails. The second floor was narrow, with just 2 rooms, his own and the guest room. This one, he said, opening the door. It was small but tidy. A single bed with a patchwork quilt, a basin and mirror. No windows, but the walls pulsed with the sound of ticking, as if the clocks downstairs breathed through the floorboards. Sleep well, Elias said, pausing at the threshold. I always do, she replied. He waited for her to ask questions, about the town, the clocks, about him. She didn't. When he returned downstairs, he lingered in the doorway of his workshop. His eyes drifted inevitably to the tall black clock in the corner. The sleeper. Its face was still dark, its pendulum unmoving, but Elias felt something new in the air. Not cold, not warm, aware. At midnight, Elias awoke to silence, and then tick-tick. He sat up sharply in bed, heart pounding. He knew the sound of every clock in his shop. Their ticks formed a familiar rhythm, a lullaby of routine and precision. But this tick was different, slower, deeper, like it echoed from somewhere behind the walls. Throwing on his robe, Elias crept down the stairs, lantern in hand. The shop was dark, the other clocks were still, but in the far corner, the sleeper was awake. Its long, silver hands were moving. Tick, tick, tick! He hadn't wound it, he hadn't touched it, and standing in front of it, barely visible in the lantern light, was the woman. She wasn't touching the clock. But her hands were raised, her lips moved soundlessly. Elias tried to speak, but his throat locked. He stepped forward, and the floorboard creaked. The woman turned slowly and smiled. Her eyes caught the lantern's glow again, silver like moonlight trapped in glass. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Did I wake you?" "What are you doing?" Elias rasped. "That clock, it hasn't ticked in 50 years. It was never dead," she said, "only resting, like me." She stepped aside, revealing the face of the sleeper. Its glass pane no longer showed the hands. Instead, Elias saw a reflection. But it wasn't his shop, not entirely. In the glass was a room filled with shadowy figures, standing still, watching. Their faces were blurred, featureless, but their eyes, he could feel their gaze. The woman touched the brass frame gently. "They remember you, Elias." He staggered back. "What are you?" She turned toward him. Her smile never reached her eyes. "A guest," she said, "and once so were you." The next morning Elias awoke, slumped in his armchair. The shop was silent again. The sleeper stood still. The guest was gone. Only a single item remained, a silver key on the counter, cold to the touch. He never spoke of it to anyone. But every night after that, the sleeper ticked softly in its sleep, waiting. And Elias, ever gentle, ever watchful, kept dusting the key, just in case she ever returned to wind it again.